Hey there, so today we're diving into how our grandparents managed to preserve food, especially during tough times. It's kind of amazing to think about the ways they made things last, even when resources were scarce. During the wars that reshaped Europe, food scarcity wasn't just an inconvenience, it was a daily challenge. Our grandparents didn't waste anything because they couldn't afford to. Every scrap, every leftover, was carefully managed. They developed routines that turned simple meals into sources of lasting nourishment. These methods weren't about gimmicks. They were practical, tested, and shaped by necessity. Understanding these routines gives modern viewers insight into resourcefulness and survival during one of history's most trying periods. Planning ahead and preserving what little they had became second nature for our grandparents. They relied on time-honored techniques like canning, drying, and fermenting to stretch their supplies through the lean months. Their approach wasn't just about getting by. It was about making sure their families had enough, no matter what. And honestly, there's a lot we can learn from their determination and creativity. They planned meals around preservation from the start. One key principle was that leftovers weren't an afterthought. They were planned for at the outset. Recipes were chosen not just for taste, but for how long the food could last and how it could be reused. For example, roasting a whole chicken was never done without planning multiple meals in mind. The first night, the meat might be served as the main course. The next day, the bones would be used for a rich stock, and the following day, shredded chicken would appear in a stew or pie. Vegetables were often cut and cooked in ways that extended their shelf life. Carrots and potatoes were stored in cool, dark cellars, sometimes layered in sand to prevent sprouting. This careful planning ensured that no ingredient was wasted and that every meal produced the maximum yield. Now, when it came to keeping food safe and lasting longer, temperature and storage techniques were absolutely essential. Folks relied on root cellars, ice houses, and even underground pits to keep things cool. They used salt, vinegar, and smoke to preserve meats and vegetables, making sure nothing spoiled before it could be eaten. These methods, passed down through generations, made sure that families stayed fed, even when resources were scarce or the weather turned rough. They understood temperature and storage. Our grandparents had an intuitive understanding of temperature management long before modern refrigeration. Cold cellars, stone-paved pantries, and even the shady side of a yard served as natural refrigerators. Meat, dairy, and perishable leftovers were wrapped in cloth or waxed paper and stored in cool spaces. Milk was boiled and skimmed to extend its life, while butter was salted and pressed to resist spoilage. They also knew that leaving food uncovered or in direct sunlight was a fast track to waste. These practices might seem simple, but they were highly effective in prolonging freshness. Applying this today could mean using your pantry's coolest corner for root vegetables, or storing soups in tightly sealed containers in the fridge to stretch their usability. When it came time to reheat leftovers, folks were careful not to waste a single bite. They'd gently warm stews and soups over a low flame, stirring often to avoid scorching. Leftover bread became bread pudding or stuffing, and yesterday's roast could be sliced thin for sandwiches or simmered into a hearty hash. Really, nothing was ever thrown out without a second thought. It was all about making the most of what you had and turning yesterday's meal into something new and satisfying. That kind of creativity, well, it's just as useful today as it was back then. They used heat carefully to prolong leftovers. Reheating was more than just warming up food. It was about maintaining safety and flavor. Grandparents often reheated food slowly, over low heat, to prevent overcooking and drying out. Casseroles, stews, and soups were simmered rather than boiled, which kept them edible for several days. This also applied to baking. Breads and pastries were kept in airtight tins or cloth to avoid staleness, and any slightly hardened bread could be turned into breadcrumbs or dried for puddings. Modern viewers can take note by reheating, gently storing in proper containers, and thinking ahead about how leftovers can be incorporated into new dishes rather than tossed. They creatively transformed leftovers into new meals. Perhaps the most remarkable aspect of these routines was the ability to reinvent meals. Cold roast meat became meat pies, or hash leftover vegetables were blended into soups. Stale bread was made into puddings, dumplings, or even fried snacks. Nothing was sacred, and everything had a second life. This approach teaches that leftover management isn't about forcing a meal. It's about creative transformation. For example, leftover boiled potatoes can be mashed with herbs for a quick side dish or turned into pancakes. Leftover cabbage could be shredded, sautéed, and paired with eggs for a filling supper. These techniques made every portion of food contribute to the household's survival. Portion control played a big part in making food last, Folks would serve just enough for each meal, making sure nothing went to waste. By carefully measuring out servings, they not only stretched their supplies, but also kept flavors fresh from start to finish. Covering dishes tightly and storing them in cool, dry spots helped preserve taste, texture, and safety. These habits, passed down through generations, showed real respect for the work that went into every meal and for the food itself. They relied on careful portioning. Grandparents also mastered portion control. They understood that taking more than needed at one meal increased waste. Food was served in measured portions, with smaller amounts on plates to allow everyone to take seconds if necessary. Large family meals were planned so that the quantity matched the household's appetite and storage capacity. Today, this principle can help reduce modern food waste. Serving smaller portions initially and saving the rest in clearly labeled containers for future meals replicates this historical practice perfectly. They preserved the flavor while storing the food. Preserving food wasn't just about safety, it was also about taste. Herbs, spices, and simple pickling techniques kept leftovers enjoyable. By writing down these old methods and actually putting them into practice, we can make a real difference in how we handle food today. It's all about learning from the past to make smarter choices for the future, whether it's portion control, preserving flavor, or just being mindful of what we have. These lessons are still mighty useful even now. Cabbage might be fermented into sauerkraut, fruits preserved with sugar or vinegar, and meat cured with salt. These methods allowed families to consume food weeks or months after initial preparation while maintaining nutrition and flavor. Modern enthusiasts can apply this by pickling vegetables, fermenting foods, or seasoning leftovers to make them appealing even after storage. They documented and passed down methods. Finally, one reason these routines were effective is that they were documented in practical ways. Grandparents often taught children how to use scrap store foods and combine leftovers efficiently. Recipes were passed verbally or in handwritten notes, emphasizing what worked in real households under real scarcity. For anyone interested in historical survival skills, collecting these methods from older relatives or archival cookbooks offers both practical guidance and a connection to past resilience. Applying these lessons today, the old routines of managing leftovers teach modern viewers that planning careful storage and creativity are timeless skills. Whether for historical understanding, emergency preparedness, or just reducing waste in your own kitchen, these methods are directly applicable. Start by thinking like our grandparents. Plan meals with leftovers in mind, use natural cool spaces, reheat carefully, and repurpose what remains into something new. These practices provide insight into history while offering immediately practical benefits. If you want to explore more historical routines that shaped survival and daily life in Europe, subscribe to the Warpaths of Europe channel, share this guide with fellow history enthusiasts, and keep these timeless lessons alive in your own home.